Hello, I'm Casey Koss, host of the podcast Casey's Cause, where I take an unconventional approach to some of the hottest issues of the day and hopefully inspire or even provoke critical thinking along the way. My goal is for us to find common ground through a fresh point of view. I invite you to join me on this journey. Welcome to Casey's Cause. I'm your host, Casey Koss, and I want to give you permission to be bored with border security. Not because it doesn't deserve our attention, it does, but because of the political benefits derived by politicians from the predictable reactions to the vilification of victims on both sides of the border with Mexico, farmers, ranchers, and immigrants. Perpetuating chaos on our border yields the desired results politicians exploit to get our vote because it works. A little history of this, I think, is in order. I recall the recent history as the fours and the eight. The proposed bipartisan legislation, H.R. 815, took 4 months of negotiation and only 4 days for support to collapse among Republicans who took their cue from Trump. And it has been 4 decades since the last comprehensive immigration reform was enacted by President Reagan. Congress redoubled the effort at immigration reform in 2013 under President Obama, when the so-called bipartisan Gang of Eight proposed legislation to make it harder for employers to hire the undocumented. The effort failed, and that is how, more than a decade later, we have arrived at the current stalemate by design. And the beat goes on. Encounters with immigrants by border security were 1.7 million in 2021 and increased to 2.4 million in 2022 and then 2.5 million in 2023 and is expected to hit an all-time high of 3.1 million in 2024. However, in the last year of President Trump's term, encounters with immigrants fell to 458,000. More of a mental wall than a physical one, it seems to me. All the while, both political parties pandered to their own constituencies. Trump promised to build a wall paid for by Mexico. That never materialized. While Biden's promises of immigration reform and a pathway to citizenship didn't either. Clearly, the amount of immigration, legal and illegal, depends on who is in office and which political party controls the presidency. Actually, it always does. Currently, the proposed legislation provides for, quote, border emergency authority, unquote, enabling the government to summarily deport migrants who enter outside ports of entry without permitting them to apply for asylum, delegating deportations, in essence, to agents at the border. Worth noting, the bill defines encounters to exclude apprehensions of unaccompanied migrant children. The federal government has a lot of discretion over when to implement this new emergency summary deportation process. It does not require it to be publicly announced. It's no secret. It can be kept secret. ICE would receive funding to increase detention beds from 34 to 50,000, a 37% increase, with funding to hire 4,300 new asylum officers. The bill also includes $1.4 billion for cities and states that provide critical services to newcomers and expedites work permits for people in the country who qualify. There is nothing in the proposed legislation addressing the root cause of immigration, however, namely political instability, particularly in Central America. And there is no pathway to citizenship for dreamers or the undocumented in this plan. Legal migration would also increase by 13% for employment-based visas, 7% for family-based ones, an acknowledgement really of the low birth rate in the U.S., creating labor shortages across the nation. This is being played out in the Florida experiment, forcing the undocumented to seek work out of state. Already, the agriculture and construction industries are experiencing severe labor shortages throughout the peninsula state. A brief history of guest worker programs in the U.S. may provide insight into a possible solution to our immigration and worker shortage problem. The Immigration Act of 1917 contained a provision granting entry to temporary workers from the Western Hemisphere who would otherwise be considered inadmissible, mostly from Mexico. When the program ended, illegal immigration began. By 1922, of 77,000 Mexican workers admitted to the U.S., only 35,000 returned to Mexico. Yet Congress went ahead and enacted the Mexican labor program from 1942 to 1947, known as the Bracero program. Next, the H-1B program for skilled workers in 1952, then the L-1 program for intra-company transfers in 1970, and the O-1 program for individuals with extraordinary abilities in 1990. Who qualifies for that? Elon Musk? Of the nation's 46.2 million foreign-born in 2022, 10.5 million unauthorized immigrants represent 3% of the total U.S. population and 22% of the foreign-born population. As of 2022, 29.4% of Pasadena, California's residents were born outside of the U.S., higher than the national average of 14%. In 2021, the percentage of foreign-born citizens in Pasadena was 31%. Los Angeles County is home to nearly 3.5 million immigrants, over a third of the county's total, second only to New York City. Now that we know who the major party candidates for president are, Harris and Trump are duking it out over border security. Ironically, they both support building a wall, after Harris reversed her policy on its construction, which Trump has always aggressively sought and not delivered. In 2019, Harris declared the wall a medieval vanity project, and 5 years later, it has become her own medieval vanity project, coming from the candidate who says, "We won't go back." Trump has promised mass deportations of migrants who have entered the U.S. illegally, although the Republican has not defined how many deportations could take place under his plan. Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, said, quote, "Let's start with 1 million. That's where Kamala Harris has failed. Then we can go from there," unquote. Department of Homeland Security and Pew Research numbers indicate 11 million undocumented immigrants are living in the U.S. The New York Times recently reported that in order to help expedite mass deportations, Trump proposes bypassing due process hearings. And to help Immigration and Customs Enforcement carry out sweeping raids, Trump vows to deputize local police officers to assist federal agents and National Guard units with the effort. Although Republicans have repeatedly claimed that Harris served as President Biden's border czar, she was never officially tasked with border-related policies. Harris was reportedly charged with examining the root causes of migration from Central America. In her acceptance speech at the Democratic Convention, Harris vowed to reform our broken immigration system, create an earned pathway to citizenship, and secure our border. Harris announced in March $5.2 billion in pledges from private companies have been made to prop up Central American communities to deter illegal entry to the U.S. Harris cautioned, however, the problems, of course, did not occur overnight, and the solutions will not be achieved overnight. Harris backs Biden's $20 billion border security plan that has twice failed to get through Congress. She has pledged to crack down on fentanyl and human trafficking across the border. Like Biden, Harris vows to keep pushing for a road to more legal protections for younger immigrants and create a pathway for citizenship for millions who have lived in the U.S. without documentation. And the beat goes on. In any case, all the relatively positive proposals have amounted to another stalemate. If and until we stop reacting to fear-mongering politicians and demand solutions, nothing will change at the border, period. It is just that simple. We may have a new opportunity after November's election, but until then, expect nada.